To the casual observer, this is nothing more than wildlife, a wild boar tending to her new litter of piglets. But wildlife experts don't see Canadian bacon, they see a pig not native to North America.
Louisiana farmers thought they were fighting an unwinnable war against millions of destructive super pigs, until entire herds started vanishing overnight without a trace. When frustrated landowners launched a high-tech thermal drone to catch what they assumed was a rival hunting crew in the act, the heat signature moving through the tree line left them completely speechless. What that camera exposed high above the swamp changed everything we know about the Deep South and left local experts scrambling for answers. Louisiana's swine crisis. You might think a couple of stray pigs on a farm sound like no big deal, but in Louisiana, wild hogs have turned into an absolute nightmare for just about everyone. State wildlife experts estimate that anywhere from 500,000 to over 900,000 of these animals are running wild across all 64 parishes. And honestly, they are not just hanging out in the woods eating acorns, they are actively wrecking the state's farmland day in and day out. A detailed survey done by the LSU Aggie Center, released in the year 2022, looked closely at the numbers, and the financial destruction is just staggering. We are talking about $91.1 million in total losses every single year. Out of that huge number, direct damage to crops like sugarcane, rice, corn, and soybeans steals $66.2 million right out of the pockets of hard-working farmers. The other $24.9 million goes toward fixing everything else the hogs break, which includes torn-up fences, crushed drainage ditches, and ruined levees. When a large sounder invades a field, they use their tough snouts to root deep into the soil, flipping the earth upside down like a giant plow and leaving behind huge craters that can wreck expensive tractor equipment. Part of the reason this crisis feels so completely unstoppable comes down to basic pig biology. Female hogs, called sows, grow up fast and can start breeding when they are only 6 to 8 months old. Their pregnancy time is famously short, lasting about 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. On top of that, a healthy sow can easily drop 2 litters a year, with each litter carrying anywhere from 6 to 12 little piglets. If the food supply is good, their population can practically blow up overnight. Wildlife managers have run the math, and they found that hunters would need to harvest around 70 to 75% of the entire hog population every single year just to keep the total number from growing. But right now, hunters do not harvest anywhere close to that amount, so the herds just keep getting bigger and bigger. Traditional traps and night hunting trips simply cannot keep up with an animal that multiplies this fast. Farmers were getting totally pushed to the brink of running out of cash, realizing that old-school methods were falling way behind. That is why desperate landowners started hiring high-tech teams using flying gear straight out of a military base to hunt down these herds from the air, unaware that their heat cameras were about to spot something far stranger than a pig. Airborne surveillance. When traditional methods failed, professional agricultural abatement teams stepped in with their high-tech gear that transformed the fight against wild hogs. Instead of walking blindly through muddy cornfields or setting static traps, these modern crews take to the sky using enterprise-level heavy-lift drones. These flying platforms carry specialized long-wave infrared sensors, sometimes using high-resolution radiometric cameras. It helps to note that thermal sensors do not rely on visible light or glowing flashlights at all. Instead, they detect infrared radiation, which is the actual heat coming off any living body. The camera converts those heat differences into a clear digital map displayed right on a controller screen. Cold ground and trees show up as dark gray or black, while a warm animal glows like a bright white bulb in the night. This is how a typical mission plays out. Long after midnight, a licensed drone pilot launches the aircraft into the cold air, sending it up 200 to 400 feet above the crop fields. From that height, the pilot flies a clean grid pattern across thousands of acres, scanning the ground below. Because wild hogs are group animals, an entire herd eating in a rice field pops up on the screen almost immediately. The drone operator uses built-in laser rangefinders to calculate exact global positioning system coordinates for the sounder. Then, using encrypted two-way radios, the pilot calls out directions to a ground team equipped with suppressed thermal rifles, guiding them silently into position downwind. This airborne advantage completely flips the script on wild hogs and gives humans the upper hand in absolute darkness. What used to take days of tracking through thick brush can now be handled in a single sweep. But running these high-tech flights night after night requires a lot of focus from the pilot. Staring at a monochrome monitor for hours creates serious eye strain, and hot, humid southern nights can degrade the video feed. Pilots have to learn the exact physical movements of every single wild animal in the parish. A hog moves across a field in a very specific way, continuously turning up dirt with its nose while staying close to its herd. So when an operator spots a bright heat signature moving with a completely different rhythm, it immediately raises red flags. That is precisely what happened when a routine flight picked up a mystery shape in the field, moving like a phantom hunter, quietly tracking the very same pigs. Identifying non-swine heat signatures. When you are hovering a drone 300 feet over a dark field, you rely completely on animal movement to figure out what is glowing on your screen. Wild hogs are pretty easy to spot. They travel in tight, chaotic groups called sounders, constantly bumping into each other while digging through the dirt. On a thermal screen, they show up as round, restless heat blobs that scatter the moment a tractor engine turns over or a truck drives past the property line. A white-tailed deer, on the other hand, looks totally different on the monitor. Deer move with long, slow steps, constantly stopping to lift their heads high and check for danger. Their heat signatures look taller and much more spread out compared to a noisy group of feeding pigs. Even local cows or lost hunting dogs have distinct habits that experienced drone operators recognize right away. That is why seeing something strange near the tree line changed the whole mood in the control vehicle. During this particular night flight, the pilot had already locked onto a sounder of 11 hogs clustered in the damp soil. But right along the dark edge of the woods, a 12th heat signature slipped into view. It stayed completely isolated, crouched low near the brush. Instead of rooting for roots or drifting across the open field with the pigs, this shape held dead still, silently facing the herd. The way this mystery animal moved was the real shocker. It started creeping forward with agonizing slowness, taking one careful step at a time. It kept its belly pressed close to the dirt, using the wind to hide its presence. Every couple of seconds, it froze in place, holding completely still, as if measuring the exact distance to the nearest piglet. This was not the casual wandering of a grazer or the clumsy digging of a wild pig, but the patient, highly calculated approach of a big predator setting up an ambush. Before the hunters on the ground could even get into position, the heat signature suddenly exploded forward in a blinding flash of speed. The hog herd scattered in pure panic, running everywhere. 11 seconds later, the mystery hunter dragged its catch into the heavy trees and vanished from the screen entirely. The pilot sat there staring at the monitor, knowing they had just caught something on camera that should not be hunting in modern Louisiana. The limits of aerial infrared. While thermal imaging feels like a cheat code for night hunting, it comes with physical limits that operators run into constantly. A drone hovering high up in the air does not take standard digital photos. It relies on a radiometric thermal sensor, which simply measures the raw heat coming off objects on the ground. The camera turns those temperature differences into a screen picture. But because the sensor works with heat energy rather than reflected light, every piece of visual detail gets stripped away. You do not see spots, fur colors, facial features, or clear outlines. All you get is a glowing shape floating against a dark background. At 200 or 300 feet up in the sky, standard drone thermal sensors run on a resolution of 640 by 512 pixels. That sounds decent on paper, but when you zoom in on a small target far below, that target might only be made of 20 or 30 glowing pixels. Down on the screen, a small wild pig, a crouched bobcat, and a heavy coyote can end up looking remarkably similar. If an animal stops moving and tucks its limbs underneath its body, its unique outline vanishes completely. The pilot ends up looking at a simple round blob of white light. The climate in Louisiana makes things even tougher for high-tech gear. On humid summer nights, heavy moisture hangs in the air. Water vapor actually absorbs and scatters infrared signal rays before they can reach the drone lens high above. This creates a hazy, low-contrast video feed where warm animals start blending right into the warming soil around them. There is also the issue of thermal bloom. During hot days, big sun-baked logs, muddy puddles, and exposed boulders soak up huge amounts of heat. Long after the sun goes down, those objects slowly leak that stored energy back into the night air. A drone screen can fill up with dozens of glowing spots that turn out to be nothing more than hot rocks or warm mud holes, which would only waste precious time for the flight crew. In addition, thick tree canopy adds one more huge blind spot. Infrared signals cannot punch through solid wood or heavy oak leaves. The second an animal steps under dense branches, its heat signature cuts out instantly, almost as if it vanished from the earth. That is why the mystery shape from that midnight flight caused such a headache inside the trailer. The drone operator knew for a fact that the target did not move like a wild hog. The speed, low crouch, predator-like movement, and the long pauses were all wrong for a pig. But because of sensor limits and distance, they could not prove what it actually was. They needed to track how this phantom hunter moved over several nights to start putting the puzzle together. Stalk and ambush mechanics versus sounder dynamics. To figure out what was really out there, the flight crew had to stop looking at static heat blobs and start studying how animals actually move. Animal movement tells a very specific story if you know what to look for. Feral hogs follow a chaotic pattern, driven entirely by group safety and food. A sounder moves through a field like a noisy lawnmower. The pigs constantly bump into one another, change directions without warning, and keep their snouts pressed to the dirt. Because they rely on strength in numbers, hogs make plenty of noise and leave a big, messy trail. On a thermal screen, a sounder looks like a churning cluster of bright white dots that expand and contract as the herd feeds. Predatory hunters operate on a completely different set of rules. A large wildcat or solitary hunter cannot afford to make noise or waste energy. They use a technique called direct registering, where the rear paw steps precisely into the footprint left by the front paw. This keeps their footfalls almost silent on dry leaves and twigs. They also keep their center of gravity extremely low to the ground, flexing their spine with every stride to absorb sudden movements. On a drone monitor, this movement shows up as a smooth glide across the terrain rather than the jerky, bobbing walk of a pig or deer. When the pilot replayed the thermal footage, the difference in movement mechanics was undeniable. The mystery signature never drifted into the open center of the field. It stayed along the outer perimeter, using the dark tree line as cover. While the hog herd moved with noisy confidence, the shadow hunter used a classic stalk and ambush approach. It would take 3 or 4 slow steps, lower its shoulders below its spine, and hold completely still for several minutes at a time. It calculated the wind direction, staying downwind so the pigs could not catch its scent. The most telling detail was how the animal targeted its prey. It did not charge straight into the middle of the sounder, where large adult sows with dangerous tusks could fight back. Instead, it patiently tracked the outer edge of the group, waiting for a young piglet or subadult hog to stray just a few feet away from the main herd. This level of patience and physical control ruled out wild dogs or scavengers. The flight team was looking at a textbook solitary felid attack, which proved that a major predator was actively hunting the local hog population from the shadows. Reading kill sites and carcass evidence. When aerial thermal footage leaves room for debate, wildlife investigators turn to ground forensics to solve the case. The drone might spot a phantom hunter from 200 feet up, but the true identity of an apex predator gets written straight into the soil and physical remains left behind at a kill site. Tracking a secretive hunter means heading deep into the brush, where thermal cameras spotted the final burst of movement. searching for the physical markers that distinguish one predator species from another. Field biologists and experienced game trackers use standardized diagnostic guides to analyze animal remains. The way a predator attacks, slaughters, and consumes its prey follows strict species-specific behaviors that are almost impossible to fake. When wild dogs or coyotes bring down a hog, the scene looks chaotic and messy. Canids lack the sharp retractable claws needed to grab and hold a struggling pig, so they attack in small groups or bite repeatedly at the hindquarters, legs, and flanks. A coyote kill leaves widespread tearing wounds, chewed skin, and a carcass left completely out in the open. Coyotes also scatter internal organs around the feeding area and leave behind small, shallow tooth punctures with narrow spacing. A large wild cat leaves behind a completely different crime scene. Felids are solitary ambush hunters that rely on clean, lethal efficiency. When a big cat strikes a subadult hog, it uses broad front paws to pin the animal down while driving deep canine teeth directly into the back of the neck, base of the skull, or throat. This method crushes the windpipe or breaks the spinal cord instantly, leaving wide-set puncture marks that reflect a massive jaw structure. You will also find clean, parallel claw lacerations sliced across the shoulders and back of the prey where the cat gripped its target. The most telling clue can be seen after the kill takes place. Coyotes, wild dogs, vultures, and some other predators feed right where the animal drops, leaving bones and hide scattered across the dirt. A big cat does the exact opposite. Because wild felids value secrecy above everything else, they drag heavy prey away from open fields, pulling the carcass dozens of yards into dense thickets or creek bottoms. Once tucked away in cover, the cat carefully shears the hair or skin back from the ribs, eats its fill, and executes a unique behavior called catching. Catching involves carefully covering the uneaten carcass with piles of dead leaves, pine needles, dirt, and twigs to hide the food from scavengers so the predator can return to feed over several nights. Finding a 100-pound hog dragged into deep cover and buried under a neat mound of forest debris is undeniable proof of a large felid at work. It gives researchers the physical evidence needed to narrow down their suspect list. Process of elimination. To prove that a mystery animal is hunting in Louisiana, investigators have to work like crime scene detectives. You cannot just jump to wild conclusions because you saw a weird white shape on a screen. You have to take a list of every known meat-eating predator living in the state and cross them off one by one using hard facts such as physical body traits and hunting styles. The first suspect on everyone's list is always the eastern coyote. Coyotes are super common across all 64 Louisiana parishes. They are clever, adapt to anything, and spend their nights roaming farmlands looking for an easy meal. But when you look closely at how coyotes operate, the theory falls apart pretty fast. Coyotes are canids that rely heavily on pack tactics or loose family groups to bring down anything bigger than a rabbit. While a group of coyotes might gang up on a tiny, helpless piglet that strayed away from its mother, a lone coyote will almost never attack a 50 or 100-pound wild pig. Wild hogs have razor-sharp tusks, thick skin, nasty tempers, amongst others. A single mistake means a broken leg or a fatal gash for a coyote. Plus, as we learned from ground forensics, coyotes leave messy kill sites, never drag heavy prey deep into cover, and completely lack the ability to cache a carcass under leaves. The phantom on the drone screen acted alone, moved like liquid, and struck with terrifying single-shot precision. That eliminates the coyote. Next up is the bobcat. Bobcats are native felids, so they certainly have the right hunting style. They sneak around in the dark, use direct registering to walk silently, and attack using the classic stalk and ambush technique. They also have sharp retractable claws and can drag small prey into heavy brush. However, bobcats run into a massive physical size limit. A healthy adult bobcat in the deep south usually tops out between 15 and 35 pounds, while a 30-pound bobcat is a ferocious hunter that can easily take down rabbits, squirrels, or newborn fawns. It simply lacks the raw bone density and muscle power to tackle a growing wild hog. The thermal heat signature caught by the drone showed an animal with a long torso and serious mass, capable of wrestling a heavy pig to the ground in seconds. A bobcat attempting that move would get crushed instantly. So, the bobcat gets crossed off the list too. That leaves one last major native candidate, the Louisiana black bear. Black bears are very real, fully documented, and currently making a strong comeback across the state. An adult male bear can easily weigh 300 to 400 pounds, which gives it more than enough strength to overpower a wild pig. Yet, black bears move with a heavy, bulky gait. On a thermal monitor, a bear shows up as a large heat signature with a distinct shoulder hump and a short, stubby tail. They do not sneak low through the grass with a fluid, feline spine. When you eliminate the coyote, the bobcat, and the black bear, you are left with a single, startling conclusion. The hunter stalking Louisiana's super pigs has to be a giant wildcat. Louisiana's confirmed cougar records. If you talk to state wildlife officials, they will tell you that Louisiana does not have a permanent breeding population of cougars. For a long time, many people assumed these large cats were completely wiped out from the eastern half of the country. But if you dig into official state files, you quickly find that real cougars have been caught on camera and confirmed by scientists multiple times over the last 25 years. The modern paper trail started back in the year 2002 at Lake Foss Point State Park. A park employee reported seeing a large cat moving through the woods, but plenty of folks were skeptical at first. That changed when wildlife researchers went out to search the area and collected animal droppings left behind on the ground. Scientists sent the sample to a biology lab for testing, and the results came back positive for cougar DNA. The test also revealed digested remains of a local rabbit and a dog, proving that the cat was actively hunting local prey in the area. Then 2008 came around, which turned out to be an absolute landmark year for big cat evidence across the region. Clear trail camera photos, verified by state biologists, started popping up across places like Vernon Parish and Wynn Parish. A hunter near the Red River captured a solid trail camera shot of a cougar, and wildlife experts inspected the location to confirm it was authentic. But the most unbelievable event of that entire year happened in late November, right in a busy suburban neighborhood. On November 30, in the year 2008, a homeowner in Bossier City walked out into his backyard on a Sunday afternoon and looked up into a large pecan tree. Sitting high on a tree limb was a full-grown wild cougar staring right down at him. Local police officers arrived on the scene, and because the animal was perched right above a residential neighborhood, they ultimately had to shoot it to keep the public safe. Biologists brought the cat back to state headquarters in Baton Rouge for detailed examination and lab testing. When the genetic results came back, everyone in the wildlife community was completely floored. The DNA matched wild cougar populations living all the way in New Mexico, over 1,000 miles to the west. Nobody could say for sure how the animal made the journey, but it was undeniable proof that a wild cougar had roamed right into northern Louisiana. The documented records kept growing in the following years. In August of the year 2011, state biologists verified another clear trail camera picture of a cougar moving through forest land in Vernon Parish. A few years later, in December of the year 2016, wildlife agents confirmed yet another big cat appearance up in Morehouse Parish, after carefully checking game camera pictures. Every single one of these cases was backed by hard evidence, including genetic samples and official state validation. So while state agencies correctly point out that there is no established family group living in the swamps permanently, these verified records prove that big cats do walk through Louisiana. And with hundreds of thousands of wild pigs creating an all-you-can-eat buffet in the woods, a wandering cougar has every reason to stay for a while. How western cats reach the Deep South. When people hear about a wild cougar walking around Louisiana, Their very first question is usually pretty simple. How on earth did a massive western mountain lion end up thousands of miles away in a southern swamp? To make sense of it all, you have to understand a fascinating biological process that scientists call male-juvenile dispersal. Cougars are incredibly territorial animals that need huge amounts of land to survive. An adult male cat will claim a home range that can cover anywhere from 100 to over 300 square miles. He guards that territory with his life and will actively kill any younger males that try to settle down on his turf. When a young male cougar reaches around 18 to 24 months of age, his mother pushes him out of her home area, and the local resident males force him to keep moving. He suddenly finds himself homeless and facing a choice between fighting an adult male or walking away. So, he starts walking. Wildlife biologists call these wandering young cats transients. While young females usually settle down fairly close to where they were born, young males head out on epic, solitary journeys to find a territory of their own. They travel at night, sticking to heavy brush and quiet forest corridors to stay hidden from humans. They cross roaring rivers and slip around the edges of sleeping towns. To give you an idea of just how far these animals can travel, consider the famous case of the Connecticut cougar. In the year 2011, a wild male cat was struck by an automobile on a highway in Connecticut. Wildlife researchers collected tissue samples and ran genetic testing on the animal. The DNA results came out as quite a shock. The test proved that the cat had originally been born in the Black Hills of South Dakota. That single cougar had traveled over 1,500 miles on foot, trekking across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and New York, before finally arriving in New England. It stands as the longest documented land mammal journey in North American history. Similar long-distance journeys explain how western cats arrive in the Deep South. Young male cougars dispersing from established populations in western Texas, New Mexico, or even South Dakota follow natural water systems like the Red River and the Mississippi River Basin. These dense river corridors provide endless cover, clean drinking water, and plenty of game to eat along the way. As these lone wanderers move further east, they eventually hit the bottomland hardwood forests and sprawling farmlands of Louisiana. Under normal circumstances, a transient cat might keep moving through a state looking for a female. But when a wandering cougar stumbles into a Louisiana farm parish, it runs right into a gold mine. The land is completely packed with over 700,000 wild pigs roaming the fields. Instead of burning energy traveling another 500 miles into unknown territory, the cat finds a swamp, sets up a temporary hunting ground, and starts gorging on easy piglet prey. Myth versus science. Whenever someone mentions seeing a big cat roaming through the Louisiana woods, locals immediately start talking about the legend of the Black Panther. For generations, stories have circulated around campfires and country stores about jet-black cats slipping through the bayous at dusk. But when you look at actual wildlife science, that famous story falls completely apart. It is true that melanism, the genetic mutation that turns an animal's fur pitch black, happens naturally in feline species like jaguars and leopards. However, in the entire recorded history of North American wildlife research, there has never been a single documented case of a black cougar. Out of hundreds of thousands of specimens examined by museum curators, game wardens, and field biologists over 3 centuries, not one confirmed black cougar has ever been found. The mystery hunter stalking Louisiana pigs is not a mythical shadow beast, but a real tawny cat using the night to stay hidden. So, Louisiana farmers finally have their answer to why the super pigs were vanishing, but it raises a whole new mystery. If a quick drone flight can catch an apex predator red-handed on local farmland, what other secret hunters are roaming in the dark that we might not even know about? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.